This video is brought to you by my fantastic supporters over at Patreon. Go to patreon.com/TJTheEmperor to find out how you can support the channel. Hi friends, this is
Part 6
of the complete Xenogears reference guide. As always, if you notice anything I forgot or got wrong, leave me a comment about it, and if I get enough of them, I'll make an addendum video and give you credit for whatever you found. Alright, enjoy the video. Alright, it's time to start Disc 2. Now, Disc 2 of Xenogears is infamous for basically being a visual novel with brief moments of boss battles and dungeon exploration thrown in for good measure. This is because the development team essentially ran out of time to finish the game in a normal state. As a result, the pacing of Disc 2 feels like it's going a mile a minute, throwing one mind-blowing revelation at you after another without giving you anywhere near enough time to catch your breath. I'll try my best to make this reference guide for Disc 2 not feel so stressfully paced, but given the material I'm working with, there's only so far I can go with that. Okay, let's get into it. The first major scene of the disc is a dream shared by both Faye and Ellie, who seem to have lived other lives 500 years ago as the painter Lacan and Sophia, mother of the Nissan sect. There's only one reference here I need to bring up, and it concerns the name of Sophia's followers, the Kahal. Kahal is a term drawn from Jewish history, specifically the diasporic Jews that emigrated to Europe. Kahals were essentially the local authority in charge of governing those communities. Shifting back to the present day, Faye and Ellie turn out to be alright. They've been recovering in the house of a mysterious old man named Taura, who's an expert on nanotechnology. I don't have to spend a lot of time on this one. Taura's last name is Melchior, third of the three wise men, making him the final sage of Shavat. And I gotta mention this too. Apparently Taura is the fourth month according to the calendar of the Mandeans, who are the only living Gnostic group to survive from antiquity. And I don't think this has any significance, but since the game is so full of Gnostic references, I felt it would be a mistake not to include it here. So this guy Taura, he's got a plan. Using his knowledge of nanomachines, he wants to remove the limiters of everyone on the surface by firing nanoassemblers into the atmosphere using a military installation called the Mass Driver. Mass drivers aren't a thing that exists in real life, but they have been discussed in theory. Basically, they use electromagnets to launch an object at high velocities. I don't feel qualified to discuss it in any greater detail, but the Wikipedia article is actually fairly extensive, so check that out if you want to know more. Additionally, Taura gives Faye a gift, an emotion control device that will allow him to suppress id. To quote him directly, "Nanomachines are infused through your epidermis into your brain. There they refine the SSRI intracerebral substances, such as serotonin, that control emotions." This is another reference of Takahashi and Tanaka's genuine grasp of the workings of mental health. SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are real things. They're a type of drug commonly prescribed to treat depression and anxiety, and work by, as the name suggests, reducing the uptake of serotonin in the brain. You've probably heard of Zoloft or Prozac. Both of those are SSRIs. He puts a similar device on Veltal, which he's fully repaired and given an upgrade. This device allows Veltal to enter a state called System id, which gives it the ability to draw from id's power without actually transforming into id himself. System id is, I feel, another reference to G Gundam, specifically the instances where Domon Kashu transforms the Shining Gundam into Super Mode. So the plan is set, but our party gets word of a problem. A surviving remnant of Solaris' armed forces is attempting to disrupt a peace summit between Ava and Kislev. Not knowing what to do, Shitan provides a modified plan. Faye will head to the summit, and he and Ellie will go after the Mass Driver in his new Omnigear, Fenrir. Fenrir follows the pattern of being named after Norse figures, Fenrir being the wolf son of Loki foretold to kill Odin at Ragnarok before being avenged by one of Odin's sons. The mobile weapon used by Solaris is powerful enough to steamroll over the world's conventional gears, so our heroes turn to their last resort. The central block of Kislev's capital, Nortun, is actually an enormous transforming battleship, now christened the Superdimensional Gear Yggdrasil 4. This is one of the most ridiculous references in the whole game, and it's also one of my favorites, because being a mech otaku myself, it warms my heart that on occasion, Takahashi just decides to reference something he likes, logic be damned. The name is a dead giveaway, but this is a reference to Superdimensional Fortress Macross, the 1982 anime series that, along with Gundam and Votoms, both of which have previously been referenced in Xenogears, is considered one of the holy trinity of the real robot genre. The titular SDF Macross, like the Yggdrasil 4, is a colossal battleship that can transform into a humanoid form. Going back to the Solarian mobile weapon, Fort Hurricane, this is another reference to Daitetsujin 1-7. The villain of the second episode is called Hurricane Robot, and like Fort Hurricane, it's a circular monstrosity with appendages extending out in all directions. Although Fort Hurricane is destroyed, an even greater nightmare begins shortly thereafter. At the same time Ellie and Chiton release the nano-assemblers to remove humanity's limiters, Krelian releases a virus into the atmosphere, which transforms an enormous percentage of people into wells. This is all for the final phase of the M plan, where the Gazel Ministry will assimilate the wells into some sort of weapon. The party attempts to destroy the Soylent System facilities on Earth to slow this plan down. In one of these facilities, they encounter an enormous monster comprised of an agglomeration of wells called the Sufal Mass. Sufal is a Hindi word meaning good or useful, probably meant as another subtle indication of the inhumanity of Krelian and the Ministry's plan. The only use a human has is as a component for their weapons. Actually, with that in mind, this is probably a good time to talk some more about Krelian. As I said before, Krelian is a reference to the character Krelian in Childhood's End, a member of the alien race called the Overlords. In that novel, the Overlords come to Earth in order to guide the evolution of humanity to a higher state, culminating in the species itself losing its individuality and merging with a mysterious cosmic entity called the Overmind. The Overlords' tactics, over the course of the novel, progress from mostly working in the shadows to more direct action. The parallels to the actions of Solaris shouldn't be lost on you. After primarily working behind the scenes, mostly through the actions of the Ethos and Gebler, now they're shamelessly acting out in the open, declaring war on the nations they once assisted and ravaging the human species on the genetic level, all to conglomerate the human species into some sort of weapon. While I would argue Krelian is much more unambiguously evil as compared with Krellin in Childhood's End, the end goals they have are similar enough. Alright, so after the Soylent facilities are destroyed, about 1 billion things happen in the span of what seems like a minute. The mutated wells are brought to Nissan to receive treatment, with Ellie acting as a kind of second coming of Mother Sophia. Cain shows his hand and begins opposing the Gazel Ministry directly, and Ramses, manipulated by the Ministry in his fragile mental state, kills Cain. While all this is going on, the party once again travels the world, looking for the remaining Anima relics so they can align them with their gears and transform them into Omni-Gears. In the midst of this journey, they once again encounter the elements, now piloting gears themselves. The culmination of this encounter sees the elements' individual gears, Blade Gash, Marine Basher, Grand Growl, and Sky Gene, combine into a single colossal robot, the G elements. This idea, a number of smaller robots combining into a larger one, is a trope almost as old as the mech genre itself. Go Nagai, the father of the modern giant robot show, introduced it in 1974's Getter Robo. After that, mech shows, specifically the super robot variety, almost had to have a transformation sequence in it. By far the most famous example of this to English-speaking audiences is probably that of Voltron, which was adapted from the 1981 anime series Beast King Go Lion. But this trope is not confined to anime. Super Sentai, the show that would eventually be adapted as Power Rangers in the West, began to include transforming robots as part of the team's arsenal beginning with 1980's Denziman. Now, there are so many examples of transforming robots in Japanese media that trying to calculate every specific reference in the element's gears is a fool's errand. However, I will point out one specific set of robots that I feel is so close to that of the elements that I wouldn't be surprised if it was a direct inspiration. Those belonging to the 1988 Sentai team, Choju Sentai Live Man. I bring this up because it's the only series I can think of that features a robot dolphin. I've literally never seen this anywhere else except Xenogears. Furthermore, it helps that Live Man also contains a robot bird and a robot lion, although to be fair, those two animals have been used in mech shows long before their appearances in Live Man. In the end, the elements are defeated, and the party manages to find the remaining Anima relics. This, as the Gazel Ministry points out, means that all 12 relics have been aligned with a gear. They proceed to name them: Dan, Joseph, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Judah, Dinah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, and Naphtali. These are the names of the children of the biblical Jacob, most of whom would go on to give their names to the tribes of Israel. Interestingly, Jacob's final son, Benjamin, is not given a relic. Dinah, the name of his only daughter, is given one instead. I don't know if there's any significance to this. In fact, I don't know if there's any significance in naming the relics after the children of Jacob at all. Anyway, with the Anima relics aligned, the Ministry deems it time to use the Geisha key. This has two effects. First, it transforms even more human beings, Solarians included, into wells. Second, it causes Mahanan to emerge from its watery tomb, revealing itself to be the hull of a massive spaceship called the Eldridge. More on that name to come. The party infiltrates Mahanan, and in their wanderings, discover the shocking truth. The Eldridge was a ship from a far-off galaxy that crashed onto the planet in an accident 10,000 years ago. This, combined with the fact that they discover the massive computer called Raziel's Tree, more or less confirms that the Eldridge is the same ship that we saw way back in the game's first cutscene. This is a massive revelation, and I need to progress a little farther before discussing it in detail, but for now, I can discuss the meaning of the name Eldridge. The ship is named for the USS Eldridge, the subject of the Philadelphia experiment, in which the ship in question was said to have disappeared under paranormal circumstances. Though the Philadelphia experiment has been thoroughly debunked as a hoax, the story of the Eldridge's disappearance passed on into popular culture, most notably through a series of sci-fi films starring actor Michael Paré. In another part of the ship, the party discovers a massive alien being. This is jumping ahead slightly, but we'll soon discover that this being is called Deus. Deus is the Latin word for God, any god. Remember, the Romans had a ton of them. But after St. Jerome finished his Latin translation of the Bible, the Vulgate, in the 4th century, Deus came to refer specifically to the Christian God. I'll discuss more of Deus's relationship with divinity shortly, but for now, an interesting fact. During Xenogears' development, Deus was originally going to be named, and I'm not making this up, Yahweh.
No way! No way!
Yahweh.
Whoa!
Richard Honeywood, Xenogears' translator and himself a devout Christian, told the developers that they had to change this, arguing that there's no way the game could be released anywhere in the West if one of the primary antagonists was named after the Old Testament god. Deus is eventually subdued, at least for now. The party then proceeds to Raziel's Tree, and learn even more terrifying revelations. Deus is, in actuality, the core component of an enormous strategic weapons system, supported by an innumerable number of support interface weapons. This is the god the Gazel Ministry is trying to resurrect. Raziel's Tree further says the collective name for these weapons is Yabeh. The word Yabeh is a multi-layered pun. It's not only a verbal echo of Yahweh, therefore allowing the script to contain at least a remnant of the developer's original intentions, but it's also meant to reference the Japanese word yabai, meaning it's dangerous. I gotta thank Kaysen from Resonant Arc and his fluency in Japanese for bringing this pun to my attention. Raziel's Tree also contained information on the power source at the center of the entire system, an object called the Zohar. The Zohar is a direct reference to the Sefer HaZohar, or Book of Splendor, a late 13th century work considered to be a key text, if not the key text, in the entire Kabbalistic tradition. Essentially, the Zohar is a long mystical commentary on the first 5 books of the Bible, what Jews refer to as the Torah. And when I say long, I mean very, very long. The digital edition I own, which I of course obtained through perfectly legitimate means, what are you talking about? Stop talking to me, what are you looking at? Runs 12 volumes long, and each volume is hundreds and hundreds of pages long. Obviously, I've only read a little of it. The party isn't able to learn anything substantial about the Zohar just yet, because Krelian and Graf show up, and Graf just steamrolls over everybody. Graf is ready to kill everyone right there, but Krelian reminds him that they're needed as bait, ostensibly to lure Ellie out. To that end, the party and their gears are condemned to be crucified in the land of Golgoda. This is arguably the most on-the-nose reference in all of Xenogears. Golgoda echoes Golgotha, the Hill of the Skull, an area outside the walls of Jerusalem where Jesus was crucified. Ellie, as expected, takes the bait, and flies to Golgoda in her Omnigear, Regrs. Regrs is likely meant to reference Regulus, the brightest star in the constellation Leo, therefore being another example of a gear named after celestial phenomena. Once she arrives at Golgoda, we find that Krelian and Graf did, in fact, crucify the party's gears. Hell, even fucking Choo-Choo got crucified. Now, this scene is infamous, even among hardcore Xenogears fans, as being impossible to take seriously. I'm not going to justify its inclusion here or anything, but what I will say is it's likely another example of Takahashi's mecha otakudom manifesting in full force. The robot blog Re-Remembered Love points out that robots being crucified is actually a somewhat common trope in mecha anime, and provides this picture as proof. Ellie is attacked by Ratan, who we last saw at Sargasso Point. This time he's joined by a companion, Mugwort. Mugwort is the name of a plant that has traditionally been used as an herbal medicine. In Japanese, he was named Tenpo. Now remember, Ratan also had another name in Japanese, Kenren, which was a reference to Kazuya Minakura's manga Sayuki. In Sayuki, Kenren's partner in crime is named, you guessed it, Tenpo. Without the rest of the party to assist her, Ellie is beaten and Krelian takes her into custody. The rest of the party is left unharmed. Krelian then returns to the Sol 9000 and shows his true colors. As it turns out, he was only using the Gazel Ministry to guide the world to the advent of Deus' resurrection, and now that the time is nigh, he's taking over the plan for himself. He removes the Sol 9000's memory banks. Appropriately for a computer that was itself named after 2001's HAL 9000, the death of the Sol 9000 pays very strong visual homage to the HAL 9000's death in Stanley Kubrick's film adaptation. With the Ministry out of the way, Krelian becomes the unambiguous leader of the plan to resurrect Deus, a plan he calls Project Noah. Noah, of course, is the biblical figure who built an ark to save himself and his family from the flood, but the name also has greater meta-historical significance. Xenogears' codename during its development was, in fact, Project Noah. The party discovers Ellie is being held aboard a colossal mobile fortress called the Merkava, designed by Krelian to function as the ark for the resurrected Deus. Merkava, sometimes pronounced Merkaba, is the Hebrew word for chariot, and was the word used in the first chapter of Ezekiel to describe the prophet's sublime vision of the throne of God. Also, it's worth remembering the name of the ship Krelian used for most of the game, the giant fishbowl thing, was called the Ezekiel. Say what you will about Krelian, but he knew exactly what role he wanted to play from minute 1 of this game. The party infiltrates the depths of the Merkava, where they find, bizarrely enough, the one-winged angels of the Nissan sect. There is arguably a reason why those angels are there, but that's gonna have to wait. Right now, the party encounters Ramses, piloting a new gear called Amphysevna. The name Amphysevna is a reference to Amphysevna, a two-headed snake from Greek mythology who's said to haunt the Libyan desert. I don't think the name has any significance aside from sounding cool. The same can probably be said for Miang's new gear, Opiomorph. The Xenogears fan site Xenogears Guardian Angels claims the name is a reference to something called Opiomorphus, and I'm going to quote them directly here. Quoted from a dictionary of angels, in Ophitic Gnostic lore, the serpent Opiomorphus is a name for the Hebrew devil Samael. I tried to find the source they cited to confirm this, but in my efforts, searching for a dictionary of angels and Opiomorphus only returned results for Xenogears Guardian Angels itself, and just searching for Opiomorphus returned other Xenogears web pages. I'm not saying this isn't an actual Gnostic figure, but it is bizarre that in this game, where so many of its religious references are so easily documented, this one in particular seems to be traced back only to this one specific fan site. Anyway, at this point we learn the major reason why Ramses is so hell-bent on killing Faye. Apparently, he was genetically manufactured to be an artificial contact, but when Faye, the actual contact, was born, Ramses was no longer needed and was thrown out like trash. It should be noted that when he was being manufactured, Ramses was called Ramses. Ramses probably being a reference to Ramses II, the greatest pharaoh of Egypt's new kingdom, known for, among other things, being a possible candidate for the unnamed pharaoh from the Exodus story and the subject of Percy Shelley's great poem Ozymandias. I fully admit, I have no idea why he would have been named for Ramses, if he was indeed named for Ramses at all, and why he decided to change his name to the very similar sounding Ramses. If anyone has any ideas, please share.